AI, the word that sticks to everyone's mind these days. So on the right side you can see that the global accelerator market is valued at around 130 billions by early 2032. And the report that I've been reading really significates that CPU will be part of this story, and also GPUs that everyone knows about. And also the interesting part from this report is the FPGAs. And they specifically say that the second highest compound annual growth rate will be represented in the FPGA area. So this should directly interest you in the companies that are operating with CPUs, GPUs and FPGAs. So who are the market leaders as of right now in the early phase of AI and machine learning? Well, Nvidia is the market leader in the high performance computing, so HPC. But we can definitely see that the competition is starting to move in a bit. But going back to 2021, we can see that in the top 500 list of supercomputers, 153 instances were represented by Nvidia accelerators, while AMD only had 9 of those. And this represents roughly just below 9% of the market share in 2021. Also, this is on 1-year-old report, so in 2022 Nvidia actually increased this number to 355 of those top 500s. So Nvidia is definitely the market leader in HPC. But the interesting part here is actually that despite Nvidia's total dominance in that area, the interesting part is that AMD with the Radeon MI 250 and EPIC series are basically running the fastest supercomputer ever. Frontier, that is called, is the first supercomputer that is operating at the exascale. And this is also something that's really interesting because Frontier is 2.5 times faster than the second best thing. And this lead from AMD will also increase as soon as MI 300 will be launched into the market very soon this year. So although we said that Nvidia is the market leader, somehow their competition and AMD is really challenging them for the absolute highest echelons of the market. Now we can see that Nvidia obviously really cares about the data center growth. Nvidia is generally known for the gaming side of products, and this has carried the company ever since the start of the company. And although that the gaming has been really growing fast since 2015 until 2021, we can start to see some stagnation. And there is not an infinite amount of gaming market to be gained from here. The market is quite saturated. But on the data center side, especially on the HPC and with involvement of AI starting to gain some pace, data center segment will definitely be the most important part for Nvidia's future. And this is something that the company really start to speak about. And we can see here that the data center represents 40% of Nvidia's full year 2022 revenue. And this represented a 5-year compound annual growth rate of 66%, which is actually totally bonkers. And they really speak about AI and the software stack all the time. A software stack that no one else can match as of today. Now, we can see that in the beginning I mentioned that 153 of those top 500 instances were from Nvidia in 2021. And we can see again here that they talk about that 355 of the top 500 today are now from Nvidia. So definitely again just cementing the fact that they are the market leader. Now, so what company will challenge Nvidia? Well, one of them is actually AMD, their old foe. Now we can see on AMD's last result that were presented a couple of weeks ago that the client, which is their computers, is down 65% year on year, and the operating income is down over 100%. And the gaming revenue is down quite a bit. Embedded is up, but these numbers shouldn't be fully understood in this way since they purchased the company's Xilinx. Nothing for today, we can discuss it later. But the interesting part here though, the data center, which starts to be closing into this biggest part of AMD's market revenue. Although they were flat year on year, it's just a nominal time shot in this moment. I believe that in especially coming by late second half of this year and early 2024, we will start to see even faster increase in the AMD data center revenue. Let's deep dive into the revenue and the value of the companies as of today. And on the left side we can see Nvidia, AMD and Intel and their products. And we can see that AMD and Intel are roughly on similar page in terms of the offerings, and Nvidia is close but not really as close as the other two. And looking at the revenue, we can see for 2020 Intel was the largest, and of course they are still the largest by revenue wise, but AMD and Nvidia are starting to gain some nice numbers there, especially AMD going from less than 10 billion to almost 25 billion in 2 years. But the interesting valuation here is that despite that Intel has the highest, much larger revenue on a yearly basis, we can see that the stock market values Nvidia much higher than the other two, especially considering that Intel has such a big revenue basis. This could point to either undervaluation for Intel or overvaluation for Nvidia, maybe. So the question is the gap justified compared to Intel and AMD? Or is it the case that maybe Nvidia actually is not fighting against AMD and Intel, but rather Apple and Microsoft? So having a look at those two companies that I mentioned, Apple and Microsoft, and comparing the revenue of Apple and Microsoft to Nvidia, here we can see that Apple is roughly at close to 400 billion revenue per year and Microsoft is 200. So the question arises, why should a company that has less than 10 times revenue, almost 15 times less revenue than Apple, be gaining any more market value at this rate? Because again, looking at the market cap, I mean, if you want to invest money in Nvidia today, the company is almost at 800 billion US dollar as of now. If you double that valuation, you're getting close to 1.5 trillion, 1.6 trillion US dollar. And that's way too close in the territory of these companies that we spoke about again. Look at this. I mean, even if Nvidia manages to double their revenue, still they are just so far off Microsoft and Apple. And again, look at the Intel here. You can see that despite the revenue going down, they are still at close to 60 billion per year. And also AMD is not that far from Nvidia. So the question still sticks around, why should they have this valuation? Is this defendable? Or are the other two companies, mainly Intel and AMD, lowly valued and Nvidia is fair valued? We don't know. Let's have a look in the coming numbers. So we looked at the revenue, we can see the gross margin. Okay, so here there's some explanation to why Nvidia is highly valued. We can see that Nvidia has much higher gross margin than the other two. Okay, that's part of the reason. But is it still the full reason? I don't believe so. Going into the net income, we can see that Intel's net income is falling off a cliff, and also AMD and Nvidia going down lately since the peak in 2022. But judging of the number of Q3 2022, I believe that those numbers represent more just between the lows now and the highs in 2022. And I believe that Nvidia should be maybe valued twice of AMD, at best 2.5 times, but not more in my opinion. And you cannot obviously take the numbers for Intel as they are really expanding their expenditure in investing in new fabs. So you cannot look at those losses there and compare. So you have to look at the numbers maybe again in Q3 2022, or maybe let's say a bit further down at Q4 2022 at 8 billion. And then just quick look at the PS ratio. So price to sales ratio, we can see that, yeah, I believe Nvidia at this stage is a bit too overvalued, and AMD could be fairly valued in a sense, and Intel, if they get their stuff together, probably they are a bit too low valued. So in the previous part of the video we discussed about the history and the market segment of HPC, high performance computing, and the companies that are fighting for this market share. Now, looking at what each company is good at, So the best thing for Intel is, in my opinion, the Foundry business. Now Intel has their own fabs, which the other two companies don't have, and this is just a invaluable asset if they get their stuff together, which I believe most stuff point to. So in my opinion, this is the worst of the fab business for Intel is done, or will be done soon, and they will start to basically execute better on their timelines. So in my opinion, in the Foundry business, there's just probably the clearest win for Intel compared to the other two. Valuation. So this one is interesting. In my opinion, Nvidia is highly valued and almost valued for perfection, whereas AMD and Intel offer much better valuation. AMD more a fair valuation, and Intel, if they manage to turn the ship around, a low valuation. But I believe there's also a risk with Intel, because it's not 100% sure that the fabs of Intel will start to perform as expected. If they don't, then there's really big trouble for Intel. So in my opinion, I would be the most confident in terms of valuation with AMD actually. Sure, it's not the lowest, but it's also not the highest. But we know that they are like firing up every cylinder in every department right now. So this one is quite interesting. Diversified hardware and basically product portfolio. And here I believe that AMD and Intel are a bit ahead of Nvidia, at least on the hardware side. So we can see that both of the companies offer APUs, GPUs, CPUs, FPGAs, and as we mentioned previously, all of these are very important in the market coming in the coming 10 years. Nvidia is also quite good at this stage, but not nearly as good as the other two, I believe. So chip packaging, this is the clearest win for AMD. And the packaging is basically how you can add together a GPU, a CPU, your memory together in a final package. And this is basically what the MI300 is. The most advanced chip ever made on this planet, in my opinion. I mean, this APU is absolutely bonkers. 140 billion transistors on TSMC 5 and 6 nanometers. And this includes Zen 4 cores and CDNA 3 cores with high speed memory and high bandwidth. And it's quite efficient at those numbers as well. Whereas Intel and Nvidia are quite a bit behind AMD in the packaging. So, well, once Intel had the clearest win in the foundry business, AMD has the clearest win in the chip packaging business. So basically a design win for AMD here. And this is something that I believe definitely will help AMD catching up to Nvidia in the GPU side. So AMD and Intel had their own wins in terms of the best things that they are good at. So what is Nvidia good at? Well, obviously they're known for the GPUs on the gaming side, but also on the HPC lately. But in my opinion, the best thing with Nvidia is their software stack. And this is probably as good as Intel's fab in terms of how important this is, even maybe more. So this is an absolute monumental win for Nvidia, and I believe this is also why the company had the first mover advantage compared to the other two. I mean, AMD and Intel are not even to be seen at this stage, in my opinion. There's definitely, in a sense, an order of magnitude difference in that sense. So this is where the other two companies have to catch up to Nvidia. Otherwise, this will be a really, really uphill battle for AMD and Intel. So, to summarize, why should you pick Intel? Well, they have their own foundries. They're definitely involved in CPU, GPUs lately, but also FPGAs. And I would say they're quite good at everything. Okay, the problem with Intel is obviously the GPUs, and there's been some questions in the last 5 years for their foundry, but the foundry business starts to move in the right direction. And at least that's what the industry insiders start to basically communicate. And the GPUs on the gaming side are not so good, but I believe this is a lesser problem for the hardware in terms of the HPC and the more server side of things. So yeah, I'm quite confident actually on Intel on this at this stage. And of course the low valuation. I mean, this is just definitely playing in Intel's hand in that sense that yeah, this company is so lowly valued compared to Nvidia. And again, another good thing is, in my opinion, that the worst part of the troubles is soon past, I guess. Yeah, so this is why you should invest in Intel. AMD, well, technically they're, in my opinion, in a unique position because they're in the cutting edge on most of everything they are involved with. They're on the cutting, definitely best in class FPGAs on the planet, no doubt. They have probably the best CPUs on the planet, both for servers and mobile application, in terms of efficiency and just executing their timelines with Zen 1, Zen 2, Zen 3, Zen 4 and so on. And they're actually, challenging Nvidia also in the GPUs in a lot of different angles. They might not have the best gaming GPUs as of right now, but they are still very close to Nvidia. So yeah, really good for AMD there. And of course, they have definitely also best in class semiconductor packaging, which really will start to help them, I believe, going forwards on from MI300 and the products that will follow up on the MI300 with 3D packaging and just mixing GPUs, different type of CPU core architectures for different applications, and adding to that the DPUs from Pensando. This company is just like, they are really executing very well on every single part of it. So I believe they are definitely on the cutting edge on most of the stuff. And the valuation is not as high as Nvidia, nowhere near as high as Nvidia, a bit higher than Intel. But I believe, so this is probably the most balanced take. If you're willing to take a bit risk, but not too much risk, I believe AMD is a really good bet. The really Achilles heel for AMD is obviously their software stack. They are nowhere near to be seen compared to Nvidia. And probably even Intel in the near term, because Intel has just so much good history and they have such a big number of employees with good understanding of software. So I believe that they're just poised to be better than better than AMD in that sense. So yeah, I believe that this is the Achilles heel. But on the good side though is that Lisa Su, the CEO of AMD, is really aware of this issue and they seem to really invest highly in this area. And lastly, Nvidia. Well, easily they are the leader in the GPU side of everything. And they are the leader in the software stack, which I believe is the most important. Also, they're just, the general leader in the first leg of AI and HPC, as I stated there. The problem with this company is obviously the high valuation and the lack of FPGA leadership, I believe, might be able to cost them in a sense. So, in conclusion, to be honest, I believe that if all this company executes quite fairly on their timelines and projects, I believe that all of these companies will do well. I'm not sitting in a boat where I'm saying that any of these companies will go bankrupt anytime soon. Even Intel, that have had a lot of troubles lately, they are still moving in the right direction in my opinion. Nvidia sure is a leader in many regards, but their valuation is just so far ahead of the two. So in terms of investing in the actual stock, so we're not judging how well the company is performing, we're judging how well the stock will actually perform. I believe the high valuation might be a problem, but if they execute well, there's definitely reasons to even say that the high valuation today is fair value in sense of how much revenue they will bring in the coming at least 5 to 10 years. So thank you for watching the video and please subscribe and thank you again.